that's pretty it's pretty hard, all the world over for people, I think. So we are fortunate, and it's available, and you know.
Yeah, I read that the United States is being asked to send all of their vaccinations, abroad to the countries that don't have it, because we have so much extra now that there's no demand anymore, or the demand is getting smaller.
Oh yeah, the rest of the world has been yelling and screaming about, the U.S., Canada. Canada has been, we, right? Often people joke about, I'm moving to Canada if so and so gets elected. But Canada has been doing a terrible job getting the vaccination out. They have a lot of vaccines, but they're so slow in getting it out. It's kind of hard to believe. They say in terms of piles of vaccine, US has the greatest, and then Canada, I think, is second or something like that. And then United Kingdom, Israel, but Canada has been, for whatever reason, really slow. So anyway, yeah. So it seems like travel within the U.S. is more predictable in terms of going to places. I think general trend is probably with the lifting of the mask mandate federally, you're going to see some degree of spike. I think it makes sense to expect a slight spike. But, overall, it seems, yeah, I think it's like finally getting out in terms of the U.S. But that situation is so volatile. You don't know how the variants will how the variants will mutate. And it's like I mean, maybe you already understood this, but it's kind of funny. It wasn't like very recently. Like I got it in my head. Like the virus, like chances of it going away is like next to zero. It's not going away. Just like AIDS has not gone away.
Right.
Yes, over time, less and less infections, but it doesn't go away. And so, and along the way, how many people prematurely die is the cost. Otherwise, it's not going to go away. I think maybe because, right, emotionally, it it arrived very mysteriously. So then, on that primitive level, we think that it will also mysteriously go away.
We all hope.
Yeah, but as well, it did not mysterious. It's only mysteriously turned up because we weren't able to watch, right, all the different steps that it took, right? Like in Buddhist talk, all the causes and conditions that it took to mysteriously turn up. And so then emotionally we think, oh, mysteriously it will go away. It's like, no, nothing mysteriously goes away. I mean, smallpox and polio in recent history did go away. But that's because, right, all the things that has to be done, all the causes and conditions that has to be done, so that it has no place to stand, so to say, and to hide, then right now it almost feels like, if like you think in, not in very scientific terms, but again, in terms that, and that's the problem, in terms I think that emotionally has certain resonance with us. It's like, it's almost like you feel that the virus has some sort of sentience and some sort of like plan going on. So the US is no longer friendly in terms of the virus. So now it's gone somewhere else to wreak havoc. And it's like, yeah, it makes you wonder, if the virus has some sort of sentience. It's like, ooh, it's crazy. Anyway, good morning.
We have one new person joining us today. Hi, Colleen.
Yeah, for our COVID update class, right?
Hi, everyone. I know
Hi.
some of you I haven't met before, but hello.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, so let's take a look at Milarepa, the songs of Milarepa. I know you all are still somewhere around 30. And before we move along, I will say 31, we won't really look at that chapter. It's too esoteric. I mean, there might be things that, I mean, it's fine for you to read. I don't mean like, don't read it. But just so you read it, you'll go, what are they talking about here? There is some, like kind of alluding to certain things that may or may not be obvious, and clearly is written in such a way that it's not meant to be just simply read. There are information that is deliberately concealed. And that is part of the nature of this kind of material. Even in like chapter 30, the very last song, it's kind of ironic. The very last song, it says, "Don't write this down." And then it's written down, "Don't write this down." I'm like, did someone, whoever the first person who wrote it down, caught the irony? You must have. Why, impossible, to not, see the irony of like, "Don't write this down." They asked Milarepa 3 times, "Can we write this down?" He said no.
That's funny.
So suffice to say that there are types of information, types of guidance, types of instructions that is just simply not helpful to put on paper because of the immediacy and the specific nature of those types of instructions. That putting them down, on paper and circulating them, at best doesn't really bring any benefit. At worst, can create misunderstanding and confusion, right? And then you can say, well, why don't you write it clearly? It's not about how clear you write it. It's about, like knowing from experience what something means before you can know what, something else means. And if you don't have that first experience, direct experience, being told about this next thing, it's just useless, if not potentially dangerous. Why dangerous? Think about this, right? At the heart of all spiritual training, and it doesn't matter what tradition really, at the heart of all spiritual paths, spiritual training, is in fact a radical rewiring of business as usual, right? And business as usual, even though we have a basic fundamental kind of recognition that business as usual cannot remain business as usual, nonetheless, over the years, and we Buddhists will say lifetimes of conditioning to business as usual, as unsatisfactory as it is, we have established some degree of stability within this very unsatisfactory and unreliable nature of what we call confused existence. So nonetheless, we have established, some degree of being able to be functional within this. Now, when you do the deep work that this kind of training takes you to eventually, it's bound to kind of mess up things, right? It's like, like just as simple as, like, that closet that you never dare to reorganize, because it meant, it potentially means not just reorganizing the closet, but reorganizing other closets because of that closet, and then reorganizing your emotional closet while reorganizing the physical closet. So because of that, it has an element where it destabilizes things. And when you are kind of younger and more energetic and more, dumb, you're like, oh yes, destabilizing, because that just means, annoying mom and dad, right? So it's like, yeah, like this Buddhism stuff, it destabilizes everything, and la 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 la. Yeah, but as well, no, it's not true that Dharma practice is inherently destabilizing. Right? In case you've been attracted by that and thinking that that's how it works. No, 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 no. There's a lot of Dharma practice as well. If it's done right, it stabilizes the skillful states of mind, states of the heart. You stabilize that, you stabilize that, you stabilize that. Then when you have like some reliable stability, that's when you go stir the yellow jacket's nest, when you are fully suited. But not, when you're not fully suited, you go poke around, in a hornet's nest. So anyway, some of the material in chapter 30, 31 is alluding to stirring the hornet's nest, and some very technical things. So chapter 30, is there some place that you guys were at and would like to continue, or should we move? Or it's up to you. I have no plans or agenda of what we cover today.
I'm thinking that we didn't start this last week because we had a really small group. and said that we ended with chapter 29, with the last time that you were with us.
Oh, 29. So no 30 yet.
I don't believe so. Somebody can correct me if they can remember otherwise.
Ah, okay. Well, that's good. Anyone? Anyone?
I think we stopped part of the way through chapter 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, no. Actually, you're right, because I remember this talk about using specifically. There's page 353. There is the some epidemic that's going on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's related to the five sisters and then
Oh,
certain
that's
remedies.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're somewhere in there, I think.
We
But
didn't go any
exactly.
further than we went with you the last time
Okay.
you were with
Oh,
us.
okay. Okay. Um,
My bookmark was on page 360.
360. Okay. Okay.
Stuff doesn't bear review.
Yeah. Well, this material with Milarepas, there is no linear movement. You can almost just open to some page and go there. So here's what we should do. I think let us go to I I I think 32. It's a short chapter, and the songs in there are not so easy. I mean, not so hard to understand, and also relevant. Has some relevance to how to what does that mean to me. So let's look at 32 for now. I mean, we can go back to 30 and finish whatever. If when you go back and read, if you feel there's something there that look interesting. But let's go to 32. So this is a very short chapter, just a few pages, and it involves a conversation between Repa Dorje Wangchuk, one of Milarepa's disciples, and Milarepa. So when the Jesu Milarepa was staying above Repa Dukchen boulder in Dingmadrin, he instructed his disciples' sons and several other students and had them meditate. Then there was this young man of the Tak clan who became one of his students. Then in the context of an occasion called a feast offering, this young man, his name was Repa Dorje Wangchuk, spoke. He said that basically what he said is like, I see the meaninglessness of the types of distractions that that I so habitually go after. And now that I have met you, now that I have received instructions from you, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. So I've given that up. So give me more instructions. He says to Milarepa. So then Milarepa, again in his style, sang a song. He says, "My lineage," and later you will see references, or maybe we already come across this, that Milarepa does pride himself in, so to say, as an expression of speech, pride himself in the ability to convey the Dharma through these verses. Rather than long prose, rather than kind of using reasoning and logic in a very systematic way to present the teachings, which these are all different modes of presenting the teachings. Some write prose, and then in the context of writing prose, some might use, very systematic, because Tibetan Buddhism inherited that part of Indian Buddhism, and there's a part of Indian Buddhism that indeed has sharpened the tools, so to say, of systematic logic, what we might call Buddhist philosophy. Systematic logic, using reasoning, using syllogisms to kind of exclude, right, unreasonable positions, exclude until a reasoned understanding of what this is arises. So there's that kind of teaching the Dharma. The best example today, kind of public example of that, is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Now, of course, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is already, doing something different from the others who are trained in that system. The others who are trained in the system, sometimes they are so specific in that system that they can only talk to each other.
Mhm.
When I was a college professor and going to these academic conferences, the secret confession that we always have is like, like whenever we're giving a paper, we're like, thank goodness, there is no one sitting there who has no context going, could you explain, something very basic? Because if the person asked that question, all of us would be like, right? So it's so esoteric that, if somebody says, the emperor is naked, we'll chase them out of the room. So it can be like that too in that systematic study of Buddhist philosophy. But the Dalai Lama is very good at channeling the spirit and the approach of systematic inquiry and translating that for an audience that, So he is like the super professor in terms of his own training and knowledge, but he knows the audience really well. So you can listen to his teachings and really follow, because it's very clear. Milarepa style, first of all, I really feel it's not meant for an auditorium of 20,000. It's a very intimate person-to-person encounter. Often he's only teaching 1 or 5. Right? And so then the material he presents may or may not be that relevant if you just randomly turn to some page. However, if you understand the nature of this material, then I say, then you can, mine. You can extract a lot of very helpful things. And so you can either have the attitude of like, this is also random, and then be bewildered and lost, right? In the lack of, clear systematic explanation. Or you could also get kind of pointers that cuts through, right? Kind of expertise or non-expertise, and speaks to the heart. And so that's the power of this kind of material. So with this kind of material, it's best not to splice words and split hairs, and it's because Milarepa didn't mean it that way. So anyway, he starts. He says, my lineage, in other words, my spiritual pedigree, my connection, my person to person, warmth of heart connection, it belongs to great Vajradhara. Great Vajradhara is, you could say, it's like the primordial principle of being awake. The state of being awake, the naturally awakened state, which is said to be what we all are by nature. But by conditioning and habit, we have forgotten this nature. So great Vajradhara represents this nature, recognize, realize, without error, without confusion. And so he says, my pedigree is this. In a sense, you could say, that is also the spiritual pedigree of all of us. Either we see that connection or we don't see that connection. Either we appreciate that connection or we don't appreciate that connection. If we see that connection, we appreciate that connection, then from there, a door opens, a path opens. And so then this path opens. So he says, my great-grandfather, not in the biological sense, because he's talking about an Indian person, and he's Tibetan. The spiritual great-grandfather is Tilopa Sherab Sangpo. My grandfather is the great Pandit, the great scholar Naropa. My old father is Marpa Lotsawa, and I myself am Milarepa. So here he gives a brief summary of how the Dharma, not just in terms of like information and teachings, but the inner experience of these truths. How it came to him is through this line of individuals. So his immediate teacher was Marpa Lotsawa. Marpa's immediate teacher was the Indian Naropa. Naropa's teacher was Tilopa Sherab Sangpo. And Sherab Sangpo himself, it is said, according to the biography of Tilopa Sherab Sangpo, that he directly, it says that he met, poetically speaking, he met great Vajradhara face to face. But it's not necessary to think, he met some guy. It's not like he met some guy, but in other words, it's a poetic way of saying he awoke, he awakened to this primordial nature. And then from him, this path, this lineage unfolded. So he says, this is the continuous lineage of profound instructions. And there are 6 points about this lineage. So in other words, there are 6 things I can tell you about this when it comes to this special line that I now am that person. So the implication is that now this line will pass on to you, to Repa Dorje Wangshu, right? Whoever has been instructed by Milarepa, they become a stream of this flow. So then Milarepa says, and so these 6 is sort of, just to quickly say, it's not talking about what is, actually, it's talking about what is not. Sometimes that's how Buddhist tradition talk about things. They will tell you what it is not. Because what it is, in a way, it's hard to use words. Right? Because words and concepts are things that are very much constructed and supported by our current state of confusion. So it's hard to use words and phrases to tell you what that original state, that great Vajradhara is. But it's less hard to tell you what it is not. So in that sense, the Buddhist tradition overall uses negation. But the approach is to say, no, it's not this, no, it's not that, no, it's not this, no, it's not that. Is it like this? No. Oh, you mean like, so it's like that? No. So now Milarepa will explain 6 falsehoods. Falsehoods, lies, In solitary places that have water and wood, to say that one needs attendance is false. It's but a lie. Eating companions, too, are of little use. They assault the ears with negative speech. So Milarepa says, I don't need a lot of people crowding around me. I don't need companions. I don't need people to attend to me. What do I need? Like as long as I can get water, I can get wood. That's all I need. So for us, obviously, let's be honest, our needs are more than just water and wood. We would like, eating companions. Americans don't think of having attendants or, house help, for the most part. Maybe at most, the Molly maid that comes, once every week. The Molly maid comes to do only half the cleaning. You all realize that, right? Because you do the other half so as not to be judged. Anyway, so it's good to remember this, Yeah, maybe, not maybe, for sure. I can't live like Milarepa, but doesn't mean like Milarepa doesn't have something to tell me. Which is when you get right down to it, for him living in the wilderness, in these mountains, in these caves, in this high altitude with, weather turns cold very quickly, even in the summer. He says, all I need is wood and water. As long as I can get wood and water, I can forage things, I can, to cook, to eat. The wood keeps me warm. That's it, The idea that, that I need something more than that, that's a lie, So at least for us, we should recognize the lie. Even if we cannot get out of the lie, It's like, oh no, I need not just a washer, a dryer. Otherwise, it's really inconvenient. It rains a lot in the spring, especially. Just recognize that those are just lies. We don't really need them. The point of seeing why we don't really need them, and it's important that we see, and not someone else has forced this idea upon us that we don't need. The importance of developing an awareness and attitude where all the things that we have around us, if we're able to see how I don't need this. How this works is not so much therefore, right? I'm going to throw all these things out. But therefore, while I have these things, I can enjoy them. But when they're gone, it doesn't turn my world upside down. Yeah? So needing is one thing, you know. Often what we don't need, we convince ourselves we need. Then of course, if it gets misplaced, if it gets broken, if it gets stolen, if it gets yanked out of us, oh, so much suffering, right? But if we can say, you know, not just say, but if we can really see and get it that, oh yeah, I don't need. I mean, it's good to have, but really, I don't need. That is Milarepa's point here, you know. As long as there's water and wood in this solitary place, to say I need anything else, you know, that's just. So I travel, you know, I travel a lot before the pandemic. I mean, a lot by my own standards. I'm sure by the airline standard, I don't travel enough, because as much as I travel, I cannot figure out how people get to the second tier, you know, like all these, like, you know, privilege. I mean, the first tier is like, yeah, sure, you know, but second is like, you got to work for the airlines to get to the second tier, you know. But apparently there's a whole bunch of people who are in second tier, you know. Every time you're boarding, you're like, what? How did these people? Anyway, so I travel, and at the beginning of like a lot of these traveling, it was a little like stressful. Getting ready and getting to the airport and leaving and this and that. But at one point, you know, the stress was building and building and building, you know, over time and over trips. But at one point, I don't remember which trip specifically, but I remember where in my house that information, that realization dawned upon me. Like at the end of the day, when it comes time to get from this side of security to the other side of security, I only need three things. My passport or my driver's license, depending on where I'm going. My phone and my credit card. That's it. Now I can tell you, of course, I have never done that where I only have these three things and get on the other side of security. But that knowledge, that recognition, made everything a lot easier. Oh yes, I still pack 2 bags, 23 kilograms, meaning 50 pounds each bag, and try to cram something else in and think, oh, maybe they won't notice that it's actually 51 pounds, Yes, that still goes on, but that is all going on with this, with this underlying appreciation that, no, insofar as me getting on the plane and arriving where I'm going, absolutely only 3 things are necessary. The valid ID, a credit card, and my phone. So that's the equivalent of, right, water and wood.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What the format is for these book groups, because this is
Yeah.
I can wrap my head around the material things I need or may not need. When it comes to the intangibles, like I have 2 small children, 6 and 9, and thinking from their perspective, in my mind, it seems like children really need a strong attachment. And I know that word is very loaded. The word.
Oh, those are good attachments.
Yeah, but the idea, there's one of them right now.
Yeah, those are good attachments. Those are necessary attachments.
But what is necessary? The need for companionship, the need for connection.
Oh, yeah.
Quarantine and the pandemic and how many people are so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what would Milarepa say? What would you say about that?
It doesn't matter. Milarepa is talking about his condition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I say, it's the principle. He's talking about his condition. We are not him. It's crucial to remember this. These are not, in theistic traditions, commandments from God. Then you will never measure up to whether you live up to God's expectations. This has nothing to do with that. The bottom line is, as soon as we recognize, that what a lot of the things that we call what I need is not a need. But Milarepa never said, go tell your son, you have too many needs. Why are you so needy with me? No, Milarepa never said that. But for ourselves to see. And as I emphasize, seeing that you don't need it doesn't mean you throw it away. In fact, now you have I would argue, healthy relationship, especially the intangibles, especially if it is some other person and not some other gadget. It's in fact, when we are relating to some other person, the more we are stuck in the I need you mode, there are long-term consequences to that. That you have to put aside some money for therapy that you owe to the next generation. Yeah, so the healthy balance, and it's very organic. Yeah, when the child is 3, it's a different set of needs. And the responsibility of parents to meet those needs. Yeah, and that has to evolve too. That's why exactly the word attachments. I don't like to use the word attachments because what the Buddha is talking about is entanglements. Entanglements are never good no matter what. But where do entanglements come from if they turn up? It's from attachments gone wrong. You cannot get entangled by wind. Yeah, no way that you get entangled by wind. But by rope, even if you need the rope to do a whole bunch of things, just recognize that, okay, now I'm dealing with ropes. Now I'm dealing with yarn. Right? So if I'm dealing with yarn, I should not be cavalier like I'm dealing with wind. Approach with care. Because yarn can get entangled very easily. So it's organic. So it calls for awareness, kindness. So the underlying kind of principle of how we relate to our world, how we relate to ourselves, is kindness. But kindness is a yarn. And to not say that is to be irresponsible. that kindness is yarn, not wind. Handle with care. Unkindness, right, is poison. No redeeming. So to say that kindness is a type of yarn is not to say, therefore, go take unkindness, you know. To say caring is a type of yarn is not to say the alternative is to care less. That would be terrible. Yeah, so for Milarepa, you know, yeah. If you want to fall in love with Milarepa and expect Milarepa to treat you, you know, as a partner, well, you are in trouble. Because he has no, he's not able to reciprocate. So, not that we should not have life partners, just don't choose Milarepa types to be life partners. I joke about how, you know, a lot of these saints, you know, they're kind of admirable and exemplary until they move in next door. Like some of these more, you know, kind of wild types, you know, you're like, wow, it's good to watch from afar because I can learn some lessons, you know. But once they're next door, you know, they may or may not mow the lawn on time because they operate under a different set of, right, expectations. So these cues, these reminders, as to how we apply the reminder and the cues, we have to figure that out. When Chandali, when Chandali blazes within the body, so Chandali is talking about, it's a type of psychophysical spiritual exercise that produces what is known as inner heat. But the inner heat is a side effect of states of mind, concentration that has been cultivated. When the mind is focused on certain parts of the body, you know, combined with breathing exercises, it produces what's known as Chandali. Literally, it means a fierce woman. So it's imagined as feminine, a very fierce woman. And this fierceness is experienced as heat. Heat is side effect. The point of this kind of practices is not to generate heat. Especially now we have, like, we have pretty good HVAC, you know. You don't need this to heat yourself up. But he says, when Chandali blazes within the body, to say one needs woolen blankets is false. So you see from this second verse that therefore Milarepa is not against blankets, right? In the same way, Milarepa is not against like us taking care of each other and all of that. You know? So he's not against woolen blankets, you know. It's like, oh, in our lineage, we do not use woolen blankets. It's like anti-woolen blankets lineage, you know. No, he's saying, in his case, you know, where he has already have basically mastered the inner workings of his body and mind, that, you know, he wears a thin cotton shawl in the snow mountains of Tibet. Then he says, such a load to carry is of little use. I have no desire for such a nest of lies. Which is also true, you know. These blankets, woolen blankets, there's a lot of lies. But lesser mountain cave dwellers who are, you know, nonetheless very sincere about their spiritual practice, they really have to decide, you know, do I put up with the lies or do I freeze to death? Well, put up with the lies, you know. You put on your woolen blanket. But Milarepa says, you know, but I have mastered this. So I have no need. And it's also a reminder to his disciples, his colleagues, that it is so easy for us to justify and say, oh, but it's cold. I need this. He's saying, okay, well, if that's truly the case, fine. But think, you know. It comes with a price, as in lies. Comes with these blankets. So he says, I don't need, in my case. And yeah, that's because he has mastered this ability. And we, you know, we're not there. When I'm eating the food of samadhi, is the mind in a state of evenness. Evenness mind connotes stability of mind and heart, not just mind, but heart, stable. So the ups and the downs, you don't get dragged up and down. It's not like there's become an emotional like zombie. It's just that he's not, you know, or if you can eat the food of samadhi, you remain. It's the equivalent of like not having these sugar highs and drops. So you are even keeled. So he says, once I have this, you know, to say that one needs meat and beer is false. Things that make me vomit are of little use. I have no desire for things that are cooked or boiled. So again, in his case. Now, I was reading this and I thought, oh man, my Asheville, raw fooders will quote this and say, see, Milarepa says, you know, be a raw food. This is a good diet for you. No, he's not saying that. He's just saying, you know, all the details of, you know, being so like stuck in the idea that I need warm food, I need this, I need that. He said, you know, I have no need of that anymore because between... so here I think is also speaking to how... think about it. Now let's use reasoning and logic, you know. How much time in a day do we spend attending to physical needs? Whether ours or people around us. How much time? Just give me a hypothetical but reasonable estimate.
I mean, including sleep, right?
Let's put sleep aside.
Okay.
Like doing stuff. Attending to physical needs.
So cleaning would counter that, right? Like cleaning.
Oh yeah. Oh, for some people just don't do it.
Many hours, I would say.
Okay, let's be hypothetical. Let's say 4 hours combined. Okay, let's just say 4 hours. The point is not even in the 4 hours. the point is, then the follow-up question, how much time do we spend attending to inner maintenance? Now, if we are both outer and inner beings, right? We have an outer physical life, we have an inner emotional life. Who in this group, myself included, dare declare I am spending equal amounts of time managing my physical life as well as my mental emotional life? Not even a fraction of time that I spend managing my physical life am I spending managing my mental, emotional, spiritual life. And yet when I tell people, oh, I need to go to this 2-hour teaching once a week, people look at me, I look at myself. Why? That seems kind of extreme. It's so absurd. From birth, from the first moment we get taught things, to us going to university, continuing education, self-improvement things that we learn, courses that we sign up, in the midst of all of that, did your parents, and now if your parents or grandparents, how much time did they spend, or did you spend, asking the child, do you know that you have a mind, a heart? And what's going on there? Nobody ever asked me that question. Not because my parents were bad parents, but that nobody ever asked them that question. But it's the heart, it's the mind that determines happiness and suffering. It's not the beer, it's not the meat, it's not the woolen blanket, it's not even the wood and the fire. It's the mind that determines happiness and suffering. Where does happiness and suffering take place? Tuscany, Cancun, Asheville? No, in the mind. But the mind is a terrible thing to watch. So let me go, sweep another corner of the house and, cook another yummy meal. And it's not to say that those things are bad, but disproportionately. So I would say, luckily, making a difference on the level of the heart-mind, in fact, the good news is, doesn't require as much effort as maintaining a Martha Stewart approved house. Or Marie Kondo, or whoever it is these days. I have no idea. Stars rise and fall so quickly. Luckily, attending to that which decides what's happiness, what's suffering, actually doesn't require that much effort. But it requires some effort. And that we don't give it its due, families have budgeting, right? Budget this much for the this much for gas, this much for groceries, this much for this much for this. Is there a budget line for whether money or time? Is there a schedule? Is there a budget for? Now it's time for maintenance of that which decides this is happiness, this is suffering. maintenance of that space where happiness and suffering take place? No. So Milarepa says, people look at me and they say I'm crazy. And yes, by most standards, even by religious people's standards, Milarepa's life is pretty extreme. Milarepa says, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. And he said, if you think about it, am I crazy or are the rest of you crazy? There are many funny stories like that, he behaves like in kind of outrageous ways, deliberately, and then people get outraged, and he was like, you are outraged by my nudity? So he walks around, and nude, and and Tibetan culture, there's no nudist colonies, okay? I mean, for a practical reason too, it's just cold,
Right.
He walks around, and his sister is like, don't do this. He's like, don't do what? He was like, sister was like, these things that are just hanging out, dangling around. It's like, cover them. Milarepa is like, I was born with whatever things you think is dangling around. But I wasn't born with jealousy, hatred, anger. I said, I wasn't born with that. Competitiveness, gossip. None of us are born with that, he says. And yet, we wear those things proudly. And we're not even ashamed of these nonsense that we have picked up. And in fact, we compete with each other in all this other nonsense. And are so shameless, not even shameless, but even proud of how unreasonable we have become. And nobody thinks this is crazy. And now you're telling me that, I'm just walking around with what I was born with, and you are ashamed. Like, what are you ashamed about, So that's why I said, you don't want this guy to move next door. Especially if you have kids, trying to explain to your kids why they should not walk around with things dangling. When the neighbor is doing that, it's like, Says, I have no desire for things that are cooked or boiled. Yeah, elsewhere, surely we see him begging, right? We know he eats cooked and boiled things, elsewhere. Those of you who have been attending this class, he goes and, he asks for some food and they don't give it to him. And we see how when they don't give it to him, sometimes he's a little annoyed. He's quite human. Sometimes he gets a little annoyed, or his disciples gets annoyed, and sometimes he rises up to the occasion and he says, yeah, don't get annoyed, It's just how it is, Sometimes we get, sometimes we don't get. But there's also, right, you remember there were parts where, he got a little annoyed when he couldn't get what he needed. But then he always catches himself soon enough and say, no, now, on top of one suffering, which is hunger, I have allowed another suffering to build on top, which is the resentment of not getting food. Then, of course, in those stories, they're not getting food from people who have so much. So then Milarepa reminds his disciples, how much other people have nothing. They're not responsible for our hunger. Then certain types of politics and politicians in this country will quote Milarepa, the government is not responsible for you being lazy. No, songs of Milarepa cannot be used in this way. Milarepa's teachings are always, we say, only for ourselves. And even only for ourselves, they are not, for self-torture. They are not like, oh, you have not lived up to Buddha's expectation. Oh, you have not lived up to God's expectation. It's always like, hold it up as a mirror. whatever you see that you don't like, you can change. You can change. Because it's not fixed. It's not as fixed as we think it is. When attachment has reversed from within, so here often is translated as attachment, but when entanglements have been reversed from within, to say you need material wealth is a lie. Hoarding and protecting are of little use. Busy merchants irritate the ears. Capitalism, no use for Milarepa. But again, like, I often, for me, I always say, so make sure, when you're voting for, someone to run the government, don't vote Milarepa because it will be a mess. You need someone who knows how to balance budgets and all of that. Here he's talking about something else. And here in particular, this verse here, I feel, he's also addressing certain types of behavior he is seeing around him, which is at that time in the 11th century, Buddhism has a lot of currency in Tibetan society. Even today, it still has. Buddhism has a lot of currency. And there's a lot of kind of respect and cultural expectations of giving to the monastery, giving to the spiritual teacher, right? So here, to me, he is talking to his colleagues. He says, you guys cannot, on the one hand, claim or teach people, don't be attached, don't be entangled. Generosity is good. Giving is good. Then meanwhile, giving is good. Giving to me is very good. Then hoarding and protecting all these gifts that other people have given you. And then go around saying, oh, I'm not entangled, I'm not attached. I say, no, you can't do that. If stuff don't irritate your ears, maybe there's still attachment. Maybe there's still entanglements with stuff. If the sound of stuff around the house doesn't irritate you, he says. So he says, busy merchants irritate my ears. I've no need for that. So like, these are rare, not the rule. But I have met, practitioners, monks who are like this. One very well respected in our tradition, he's passed away maybe 15 years now. 20, 30 years ago when I met him, we went to see him in his room. And he's well respected in that community. But when you go to his room, there's barely anything in his room. There is his bed that he sits on, which also serves as his sofa, and his couch, and his table. Basically, his dining, sleeping, seeing people, teaching people place is that one same room. And then in there, so there's like that bed that functions as, he sits there, he sleeps there, he meets people there. Then there's one like plastic table in front of that bed that he puts, people put like things that people give him, and his food, when it's delivered to him, his mug for his water. And then there's nothing else really, in that room. And so after we left, I went with a group of people to see him. And then you can tell, he's there, he's not there. Like, he will talk to you, he will answer a question, then he's somewhere else. You can decide yourself where he is. Maybe he's just fallen asleep, or but clearly someone different. Then when we left, the younger monks that took us to go see him, and the younger monks could tell that we were a little surprised by how sparse everything is. And then they said, "Oh yeah," he said, "we can't put anything in that room because whatever we put there, he gives them away." So he said, they said, yeah, His Holiness would provide him with furniture, a chest, to put things and some chairs. And he's like, it usually doesn't last more than a day because whoever comes, he'll be like, oh, you need a shelf? Here, take that. You need a chair? Oh, take that. Until even like utensils that he uses to eat, you're like, you need a spoon? Take that. So he keeps giving them away, and the monastery can't keep up with him giving stuff away because he's like, I don't need them. When he did one time, came to the United States and to Europe. One time, that's it. And during that one time, he wore a pair of shoes that were like falling apart, basically, when he left India. So at that point, they're like, "You're going to the West, let's get a new pair of shoes." I said, no, I'm fine. I like them. They're comfortable. I don't want a new pair of shoes. So they relented. So him and I think 2 monks traveled with him. So went to Europe. So everywhere he went, people gave him shoes. Because they saw his shoes. But he would not wear the new shoes. Yeah. And shoes started to accumulate. I remember like when he arrived in the US, there were so many bags. And of course, in my mind, it's like, my goodness, why is Rinpoche traveling with so much stuff? And then the attendants are like, they are all shoes. Because he's wearing that pair and everybody sees that and they think he needs shoes. And then we want to tell people not to give him shoes. He said, no, don't say that. So then the monks are also like, what is he doing, So later we found out when he went back to India, these friends are telling me like there's a tea shop next to where, not far from where his little room is. One day they saw him walking by the tea shop and he walks down to the Tibetan settlement, refugee settlement area, which is about a mile away down the road. And so when people saw him coming out, they're like, oh, we go with you. He said, no, you drink your tea. And he goes off. Then like an hour later, he comes back. And he comes back with like a group of elderly Tibetan grandpas and grandmas. And then they walk in, And these monks are like, what is he doing, An hour later, this grandma and grandpas come out and everyone is carrying a box with new shoes. So then they came and stopped at the tea shop, and the monks was like, did Rinpoche give you all shoes? I was like, yes. But on one promise. He made a deal with these grandpas and grandmas. The deal is within the next year, they have to say the mantra of compassion 1 million times. Otherwise, he threatened them with very bad things will happen to them. Yeah, so such Milarepa-like figures still exist within this community. and their actions are a little bewildering. But bottom line is, we know what they're getting at. We know what they're getting at. So anyway, next, when developing perseverance in meditation, to say one needs disciple sons is false. Having many audiences is of little use. They'll definitely interrupt your virtuous activity. Yeah, he's saying, having all these disciples, you think you're doing great as a spiritual teacher because a lot of people are listening to you? And he says, no, that's a lie. You're just feeding your own ego. He says, I don't need that. My virtuous activity, meaning how I'm going to help others, to benefit others, is in a way almost like it's done in such a way that that person might not even know. I don't need. So this one is again kind of, I would say, a reminder to his colleagues, other spiritual types who measure success in helping others by how popular they have become, how well regarded they have become. Milarepa says, no, don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. When meditating on, meditating, I don't like this word as much anymore. I think cultivating is a good translation. When cultivating those instructions of the whispered lineage. So this whispered lineage is talking about a living tradition rather than like dead words found in books, but a living tradition where those instructions, those experiences are shared, from mouth to ear, whispered. When cultivating the instructions of the whispered lineage, to have many Dharma explanations is false. This kind of study is of little use. It is sure that you'll just develop pride. Again, directed at those who seem to do so well, giving expositions, present company, the irony, giving all sorts of explanation as to why it's so good and this and that. He said, nah, it's a lie. Why? Because in the context of taking to heart these practices, if you don't take to heart these practices, no matter how well you can explain it, in the moment it might impress someone, but there's no lasting. There's no lasting impact. Which is very true, like people talk about meeting like great spiritual figures. Sometimes that figure doesn't even say a single word, but they are completely changed, the people who meet them. Because you can feel it on a different and a more significant level. So for all the teachers, as the insult goes, people who can't do, teach. So Milarepa says, watch out, He says, this upadesha, this instruction of 6 lies, this Vajra song, understand and remember it well. So in particular, he's teaching this young man, who of course in due time will become a teacher in his own right. So that's also partly what's going on. Warning his, advising his young students, like a day will come where, don't mistake these superficial signs of success as a spiritual figure to be real accomplishments. You have to be sincere, honest, and always try to see, what is it that you're doing? And don't let like excuses obscure your view. So this is the 6 lies. Next, there's the 6 greatnesses. Then there's the 6 fortresses. The 6 fortresses is just a list of places that Milarepa lived in that area. The part of how this song functions is also like a record of like special places in that region. So it's also a way of transmitting and reinforcing like significant sites that have, by this time, I think when this was compiled, those sites are quite well known. So people would go on pilgrimage to kind of go experience Milarepa's presence in these places. So these songs, these teachings operate on multiple levels. One of it is definitely kind of mapping out Milarepa's presences in this mountainous region. It's an inventory of like important places, powerful places, so to say. Yeah, so the 6 lies. Don't kid yourself, don't kid others, basically. Be honest. And so Milarepa says, my religion is a translation. Literally, it's like my dharma. Dharma has more a sense of like my way of life, my basic approach to life. Religion is a Western loaded term. But basically, he says, my dharma is to not deceive myself. Very famous Milarepa quote. So being honest with ourselves, it's at the heart of what he's talking about. Yeah. Questions, comments. We're reaching the end of our time.
I have a comment.
Yeah, sure.
Really just thank you, and thank you for just welcoming me in and just having an open group, and thank you for all of your comments. And it's I know I'm gonna there's a lot to
Oh, sure. Yeah.
so I don't have the book right now, but it's enough to listen
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of play with those ideas. And
Yes. Yeah. Just remember, like these I like to call them cues, not commandments, cues. They cue us to kind of reassess, all the things that we think, oh, it's that way, And so these are like, Milarepa going, really? Like, really? And it could be, yeah, really. I say, okay. But that cue, can kind of cause some pause and go, huh, that's true. Never considered that,
I just, Dr. Lye, Colleen and Betsy are the people who've been trying to put together a parents and kids program.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
They've
Right.
both worked really, really hard at it. Great. Of course, the pandemic blew it all away, but
Yeah.
but we're dedicated, and we're still
Okay.
going to move forward.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Really wonderful.
We're thinking of a picnic in the park in the fall, and we want to do smoke offering. We want you to help us with.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think kids like that, you know.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do
I
some
think they would like
version
it.
of Boy Scouting too,
Ah,
you know, like
yeah.
how to build a fire, now how to make smoke.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So yeah, so you all stay safe and you know, yeah, for the benefit of others, as they say.
Yes.
Whether it's wearing your mask or taking your vaccine, for the benefit of others. So Tata,
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
good Sunday, and yeah, we are here sort of. You know, I'm less here, but we are here every Sunday. And then also, some of you know, I've just started this series on Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara. It generally meets Tuesdays and Saturdays morning, my time 9 to 11. Your time is 8 to 10. But this coming Tuesday, we're meeting Monday instead of Tuesday because I'm getting on the plane on the Tuesday and going to pretend I live in Brooklyn for 2 weeks.
Oh boy.
Yes. Yeah, I have a former student who has the apartment in Brooklyn, and they're going to be in Denver and New Mexico. So it's my Brooklyn apartment.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah. What would Milarepa say, though?
Yeah, what the heck?
Yeah, so I'll be in Brooklyn for 2 weeks. We already have plans to walk to the Williamsburg Bridge and walk over the lower Manhattan, spend the day there watching people, then take the train back to Greenpoint.
Right.
So, Tata, goodbye.
Bye.
too.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Nice
Yeah.
seeing
Safe travels.
nice
Yeah,
seeing you,
thank
Colleen.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Did you get that, Colleen?
Down right now. Thank you. Yeah, I found it on Amazon. It's a little expensive, but that's okay. I can, I think there's a lot to learn from it over the years. It's not something that you can just take and learn and read in when, like not like a semester reading, like a college course. It's kind of like, okay, in 5 years,
Yeah.
I'll respond to this. So
Yeah, for sure. And we've been reading it with him for at least a year now. So at least.
yeah, I mean, one component you can just kind of talk and think about, even just one of those lies. I could see that being a long conversation. So
Thanks for joining us and nice to meet you.
bye.